We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis in Meseches Gitin. This is Gittin Daf 59b. The Mishnah continues to discuss cases which are mipnei darchei shalom in order to keep the peace. Bor shu karov liyama, if you have a pit or a cistern that is near the water channel. Mismale rishon, that's the one that gets filled first. Mipnei darchei shalom, again, that's in order to keep the peace. Rashi says, Bor hakarov liyama amas hamayim hamavia mayim in anor. We're talking about a water channel that brings water from the river l'sadus to the fields. Regilan Lasos Boros, and the owners of the fields, they would make these pits. Shimtiyavesh Amma, that way, if the channel would dry up, Yimalu Minabor, they could fill up from the pits. Vyashko Asadus, they could irrigate the fields in that fashion. Umargilan Meo Amma Laborachi Ismali, they would divert the water from the channel to the pit until it would fill up. Vetiknu Chachamim Sheyismalu Boros Shabesadus Helionos Shein Krovin Lamotzi Amma. So the Chachamim instituted that the pits that are in the upper fields that are closer to where the water channel is, those ones are filled up first. Vyachgach Yimalu, and then you fill up the fields, the pits that are in the lower fields. When the person would fill up the pit, so he would stop up the water from flowing downstream, instead diverting the water to his pit. So again, in terms of the order, you start from the boros, from the pits that are in the upper areas, the upper fields, closer to the source of the original water. And the Mishnah continues, Mitsudos chaya v'ofos v'dagim, if you have traps that are made for wild animals or birds or fish, yesh bohen mishum gezel. So if someone takes them from someone else's trap, that's considered to be stealing. Again, mimnei darchei shalom, that's a way of promoting peace. The idea over here is, even though if the animal goes in a person's trap, that's not really a kinyan. He hasn't really acquired it on a doraisa level, but nevertheless, the Chachamim said it's considered as if it's acquired, and if somebody else takes it, it's considered stealing. Rabbi Yossi says gezel gomer. It's actually considered full-fledged stealing. Rashi says, first mimnei darchei shalom, in order to promote the peace. Again, that's by the case of the bor. Shalote machlokas beineim ani eskorishon. We don't want the different owners of the fields to argue who's the first one that gets to stop up the water channel, divert the water, and fill his pit. This is just a takanim from the Rabbanan. It's not really the halacha, but again, the person in the upper field, he goes first. Mitsudos chaya, then again the Mishnah said by the traps, midoraisa kol kama de lomato liyade lav gezelu. On a doraisa level, if the person didn't actually pick it up, didn't actually make a kinyan, so if you take it from the trap, it's not stealing. The Gemara will explain that we're talking about traps that don't have an inside, because otherwise you'd actually have a kinyan made because it's in the person's kli, it's in the person's vessel. And Rabbi Yossi says gezel gomer, it's actually considered completely like stealing. But Gemara mefarish gezel gomer midivreim. The Gemara will explain that it doesn't mean to say it's gezel gomer midoraisa. It means it's gezel gomer on a derabanan level. Meaning both Rabbi Yossi and the Tanna Kama agree that it's gezel on a derabanan level. Just Rabbi Yossi says it's a higher level of gezel. The time of the Rabbi Yossi bekulu de kasavar asumim ne darchei shalom as she'eno zoche liknos kinyan gomer kezoche. Rabbi Yossi, the reason of Rabbi Yossi is that they said because of darchei shalom, they said even though somebody didn't really make a kinyan, they made it as if he has a full kinyan. That's the difference according to Rabbi Yossi. This person who has the animal in his trap, it's as if he has a full kinyan. And the Mishnah continues, Mitzias chereshot v'katan yesh b'hen mishum gezel mimnei darchei shalom. Let's say a chereshot v'katan. Let's say they find something, so that's also, it's considered to be gezel, it's considered to be stealing. Mimnei darchei shalom. Again, the idea is even though they don't really make a kinyan on a doraisa level, but we say that kinyan is effective mimnei darchei shalom. Rabbi Yossi Omer gezel gomer. Rabbi Yossi says it's considered full stealing. Ani hamanakef barosh hazayis. Let's say you have a poor person. He's at the top of the olive tree and he's taking the olives. Mashatachtav gezel mimnei darchei shalom. So let's say he knocks something down. He doesn't make a kinyan on it. It just falls to the bottom of the tree. That's already considered to be his. If somebody takes it, it's considered gezel mimnei darchei shalom. Again, Rav Yossi Omer gezel gomer. Rav Yossi says it's considered full gezel. Ein memachen bi'ad aniyai ovdei kochavim b'leket shechu peya mimnei darchei shalom. We don't protest, let's say, a poor person who's not Jewish. Let's say you have a poor idol worshiper who takes the leket shecha and peya, even though leket shecha and peya is really only for Jewish people, but we don't protest, we allow the non-Jews to take it. That's also mipnei darchei shalom. Rashi says, "Menakef chotech." Menakef means he's cutting down the olives from the top of the tree. Again, even though he didn't make a kinyan, it fell to the bottom by the bottom of the tree. It's still considered to be a kinyan on a derabanan level. And the Gemara says, "Minohani mili." From where do we know this? This is referring to the beginning of the Mishnah, where it says that when they read from the Torah, the Kohen goes first, and then the Levi, and then the Yisrael. Amar of Masna says the Amar Katz, because the pasuk says, "Vayichtov Moshe as Torah hazos vayitna la Kohanim b'nei Levi." The pasuk says he gave it to the Kohanim, the sons of Levi. Atu anolo yadana de Kohanim b'nei Levi. Don't I already know that Kohanim are descendants of Levi? Ela Kohen bereisha v'hadra Levi. What the pasuk is saying is the Kohen goes first, and then the Levi. That is the source for this idea. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says, Mehacha, from here, from the following pasuk, V'nikshu ha-kohanim b'nei Levi, it says again, the Kohanim b'nei Levi, they approach, Atu anan lo yadinan, the Kohanim b'nei Levi, Ninu, don't we already know the Kohanim are the descendants of Levi, Alakoin Beresh, again, it means the Kohen goes first, V'hadar Levi, and then the Levi. Rav Ashi Amar Mehacha, Rav Ashi says from over here, from a different pasuk, the pasuk says, this is from Divrei Hayam, b'nei Amram, Aaron, Moshe, v'yibodel Aaron, la'akdisho kodesh kadashim. It says again, the children of Amram are Aaron and Moshe, and then it says Aaron was separated to be Kodesh Kadashim. And so again, you see from this pasuk that the descendants of Aaron, the Kohanim, they take precedence. And the Gemara continues, Rav Chia bar Abba, Rav Chia bar Abba says from here, from the following pasuk, V'kidashdo l'chol davar shebekadusha. It says V'kidashdo, it means that anything that's a davar shebekadusha, the Kohanim go first. And the Gemara continues, Tana de Rabbi Yishmael, it was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, V'kidashdo, again the pasuk says V'kidashdo, l'chol davar shebekadusha, for all holy matters, l'ftoach rishon, l'varach rishon, v'litol mana yafa rishon. The Kohen, he opens first, he blesses first, and he takes the first portion. Rashi says, l'ftoach rishon, b'chol davar kavod, anything that has to do with honoring, the Kohen goes first, bein b'torah, bein b'yeshiva, hu yadaber barosh, whether by Torah, whether by yeshiva, meaning that he speaks first, or l'varach rishon b'su'udah, or whether by blessing first at the meal, v'litol mana yafa rishon, and balach im Yisrael, b'chol davar, let's say he's dividing something with Yisrael, lachar sheyechluku b'shava, omer lo, bar v'tol eze shetir, so the Kohen's allowed to choose first, after they divide it evenly, the Kohen's allowed to choose which portion he is going to take first. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Abai le Rav Yosef. So Abai said to Rav Yosef, Memnei Darchei Shalom, but we said in the Mishnah that the reason the Kohen goes first is because of Darchei Shalom. But Doraisa, it seems to be a Doraisa, meaning to say, we're learning it out from Psukim over here. So why do we say that it's Memnei Darchei Shalom? So Amar le, so he said to him, Doraisa, it is a Doraisa. Umipnei Darchei Shalom, but it's also because of Darchei Shalom, meaning the Torah says that the Kohen goes first. And why does the Torah say that? The Torah says that because of Darchei Shalom. But the Gemara says, what does that mean? Kol HaTorah kula nami mimnei Darchei Shalom. Anything in the Torah is really because of Darchei Shalom. It's not a Chiddush specifically over here. Tichsiv derachei Darchei Noam v'chol nisivosei Shalom. It says the ways of the Torah, all of its ways are ways of peace. Elamar Abaya, so rather Abaya says l'chidamar. Rather, what we mean to say when we talk about Darchei Shalom in the Mishnah, even though it's really Psukim, it's for what the Master said, meaning it's for what Rabbah said. The Tanya, as we learned in the Brayso, Shnayim mamtinin zel zebekara. Two people have to wait for one another when it comes to if they're eating. Let's say one of them is pausing, the other one should pause. But shalosha ein mamtinin. But if you have three, so they don't have to wait for one another. Habotzeya hu poshet yado tchila, the person who's the botzeya, meaning, as Rashi says, Habotzeya kagon balabayis shumevorech hamotzi ve'afilu hu katan. Let's say the balabayis, the one who's making hamotzi, even if he's a katan, so he's the one who's poshet yado tchila. He's the one that should take first, as Rashi says, who poshet yado bekara tchila lalafis boas perusas hamotzi. In other words, he's going to dip the bread. He should be the first one to do that. V'imbola achlo kavod l'Rabba. But if he wants to accord the honor to his Rebbe, or l'misha gadol mimenu, or somebody who's greater than him, harashus biyado, he does have permission to do so. V'yamar mara lo, and the Master said on that teaching, lo shanu ela b'suuda. That's only true when it comes to a meal. Aval b'beis hakneses lo da'asul insuye. But if they're in the shul, it's not the case. He's not allowed to go out of order to accord respect to somebody who's not supposed to go first, because that's going to cause fighting. And Rashi says, ela b'suuda ked'amr, and again, you're allowed to say, I'm not going to go first. You're allowed to give that covet to someone else by a meal. Aval inyan likros b'torah b'beis hakneses. But the point over here is, in order to read from the Torah in the shul, ein kohen cholek kavod levi. Kohen can't say, I want to give my honor to the Levi, he goes first. For Levi li Yisrael, or a Levi giving the honor to the Yisrael. To lo leiser sharu l'ensui, because that's just going to cause everyone to fight. Now everyone's going to say, I also want to go first. And that's what the Mishnah means when it talks about Darchei Shalom, Kohen, Korei Rishon, Kamasha Kosa B'Torah, Veinam Rashoy Lachlo covered B'Davar. The Torah says the Kohen should go first. But maybe you would think that the Kohen could give that to somebody else. He's not allowed to do that. So he's not allowed to change the order. Memnei Darchei Shalom. That's because of Darchei Shalom. That's what the Mishnah was referring to when it talked about Darchei Shalom. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Masna says, Hada Amrid bebeis hakneses lo, when we say that in the shul you're not allowed to accord honor to someone else, lo amar nela b'shabbos v'yamim tovim d'shchichi ravim. That's only true on Shabbos and Yom Tov where there's a lot of people. Aval b'sheni v'chamishi, but let's say we're talking about the reading from the Torah on Mondays and Thursdays, lo, that would not be true. But the Gemara says, Ini, is that really the case? V'Rav Huna kari b'kahani b'shabbos v'yamim tovim. But Rav Huna, he would read in the in the Kohen, meaning he would read from the Torah first as if he was a Kohen, even on Shabbos and Yontiv, even though he was really Yisrael. And to that the Gemara says, no, Shani Rav Huna was an exception. Rav Huna was different. De'afilu Rav Yami v'Rav Asi kahani chashivi Eretz Yisrael mechav havechai filei, because even Rav Yami and Rav Asi, who were important Kohanim in Eretz Yisrael, they were subservient to Rav Huna, and therefore if Rav Huna went first, that would not cause any fighting. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaye says, Naktinan, we have a tradition, Ein Sham Kohen, let's say there is no Kohen present, Nispar da Chavila, so then the whole bundle is undone. And Rashi explains, Naktinan Mesores Me'avoseina, we have a tradition from our fathers, Nispar da Chavila Nifsak HaKesher, it means like the rope is broken. Ibid Halevi as Kevodo B'Shvil Chaviloso HaNifredis. What it means to say is, this is according to the first explanation of Rashi, now that there's no Kohen, the Levi loses his spot. Ve'eno Kore Klau, the Levi doesn't read at all. Kacham Mori Hazok and Mori Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yehuda, V'chein Sider Rav Amram, that's what my Rebbe says, and Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yehuda and Rav Amram. Avol Mitalmidei Mori Rabbi Yitzchak HaLevi, but Rashi says from the students of Rabbi Yitzchak HaLevi, Shamati Mishmo, I heard in his name, She'ein Seder L'davar. What it doesn't mean that the Levi loses out completely, it just means there's no longer in order, Lahaktim Levi L'Yisrael, meaning the Levi doesn't have to go before the Yisrael anymore. Umisha Yirtzi Yaktim, whoever you want to have read first, is able to read first. It doesn't specifically have to be a Levi. That's what it means, Nespar de Chavila. V'yamar Abaye, and Abaye says, Naktinan, we have a tradition, Ein Sham Levi, if there is no Levi, Kore Kohen, so then the Kohen should read, as Rashi says, B'mokom Levi, the Kohen should read second in the place of the Levi. But the Gemara says that doesn't make sense. Is that really true? V'yamar Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan said, Kohen achar Kohen lo yikra, you can't call a Kohen after another Kohen. It's not allowed, Mishum Pagama shel Rishon, because that's going to indicate there's something wrong with the first Kohen when that's not really true. And Levi achar Levi lo yikra, you also shouldn't call a Levi after a Levi, Mishum Pagam shneim, because that can indicate both of them. You don't know which one, but one of them might be disqualified. And so therefore, how can we say that if there's no Levi, you call up a second Kohen? Isn't that a problem? Because it indicates a disqualification where there really isn't a disqualification. And the Gemara answers, Kiko Amrinan ba'oso Kohen. Now what we mean to say is, if there's no Levi, then the very same Kohen who was called first, he will read second. Then of course there's no issue that people will think the Kohen is disqualified, because on the contrary, you're now calling the same Kohen up twice. And Rashi explains, Mivnei Pegamo Shel Rishon, again, if you call up a second Kohen, it's going to indicate the first one is disqualified. Shelo Yomer HaRishon Eino Kohen, people will say the first one's not a Kohen. Well, the Kamei Parnach V'Kachazu Desolek Miminyon, and now the Gemara later will ask, how could people think the first one's not a Kohen? Don't they count the number of Aliyahs? And they say clearly that he does count as one of the Aliyahs. And then by Levi also it said you shouldn't call up a second Levi, Mishum Pegam Shneim, because now people will be concerned of disqualification of either one of them. Lo Yodi Inshi Pegama B'Haiminayu, people won't know which one is disqualified, but they'll think one of them is. V'yomer Rishon Eino Levi, they'll say maybe the first one's not a Levi. Lafika Chazar V'Kar Levi, maybe that's why they call the second Levi. Inami Sheni Eino Levi Al Yisrael, they'll think maybe the second one's not a Levi, but rather a Yisrael. Well, the Kamei Parach, the Gemara later will ask, Gabe Kohen Nami, by Kohen also, Amai Leka Nami Pegam Shneim. Why don't you say the same thing, that there's a disqualification, we don't know which one? Why by the Levi are we saying that there's a disqualification and one of them we can't identify, but by the Kohen you say Mipnei Pegam Rishon, that we're going to assume the first one is disqualified. Maybe they're going to come to say the second one is not a Kohen, but a Levi. So the Gemara is going to ask that, why by a Levi are we saying that if you call two Levis up in a row, there's a suspicion on both of them, but by two Kohanim in a row, the suspicion is specifically only on the first Kohen. And that's what the Gemara now asks, Ma'ishno Levi achar Levi, what's the difference that if you call a Levi after a Levi, Dika Pagam Shneim? Again, you said that there's a concern that both of them, people will think either one of them might be disqualified. The Amri Chadmi Nayu Lav Levi, people will say one of them is not a Levi. Kohen achar Kohen Nami, when you call a Kohen after another Kohen also, Amri Chadmi Nayu Lav Kohen, they're going to say that one of them is not a Kohen. Why is it that we're only concerned that people will think the first one is not a Kohen? And the Gemara explains, Kagon the Muchzak Lon Biavu, the Haysheni the Kohen who. No, the case of Kohen Achar Kohen is that there was a Chazaka. Everybody knew that the second individual was a Kohen, and that's why the concern only is that the first person, people will think he's not a Kohen. But the Gemara says that's not a good answer, Hachanami, because here also, if you're going to say that, say the same thing by the Levi. The Muchzak Lon Biavu, the Haysheni the Levi. Let's say we have a Chazaka that the second one's a Levi, and then the concern will only be by the first one. And so the Gemara says, Ela Amri, rather what it means is as follows. They might know that the father is a Levi, but Ela Amri mamzeres onesina nasiv upasle lazare. They're going to say that maybe the father, even though he was a Levi, but maybe he married a mamzeres, maybe he married a nesina, and therefore that would disqualify the children, meaning even in a situation where you know the father's a Levi, that's not necessarily proof. But if that's the case, hachanami, here also by the Kohen, even if we know that the second one is a Kohen, Amri Grusho Chalutza Nasav, maybe we'll say the father, we know his father was a Kohen, but maybe he married a Grusha V'Chalutza, V'Yachle Lazare, and therefore he disqualified his children. And so therefore, again, it seems to be identical. Why are we making a distinction between Kohen and Levi? And the Gemara continues and answers, sof, but at the end of the day, in the case of a Kohen, if you know that this individual's father is a Kohen, you don't have this concern that the father married a Grusha or a Chalutza. Why? Because Levi, Mikohava, because would that make him a Levi? Meaning to say, if this person that you called up, the second Kohen that you called up, even if it was true that his father married a Grusha or a Chalutza, that would not make him a Levi, that would make him a Yisrael. You wouldn't be able to call him up second. The fact that you're calling him up second indicates that he actually is a Kohen, and that's why the concern for our disqualification is only on the first Kohen. Again, whereas by a Levi, when you're calling up a Levi after a Levi, so there we really have a concern on both of them, because it's possible, even if you know that the father of the second Levi was in fact a Levi, but again, maybe that father, maybe he married a Mamzeris or a Nesina, and maybe this Levi is not really a Levi, so there's really a concern both on the first and second one by a Levi, whereas by a Kohen, if you know that the second individual's father is a Kohen, there would be no such concern. But the Gemara continues, Ulaman. Now, who is this concern for? When we're saying that there's a concern over here, that people are going to say that, let's say, the first Kohen is disqualified, who's going to think that? Ili Yoshvin, if you're talking about the people who are sitting, and Rashi explains, Ulaman mi pegama ulema hayoshvin ad shigal Sefer Torah. Meaning there are people who are sitting in shul all the way until the end, until they roll up the Sefer Torah. So hakachazule, what's the concern? They see obviously that he is a Kohen, as Rashi says, hakachazule lahai Kohen rishon desalik leminyan shiva. They've counted 7 aliyahs, and they see that the first aliyah counted. There's been a total of 7. They sat through the entire reading of the Torah, so it's clear to them, everybody who is in the shul the entire time, it's clear to them that the first person is in fact a Kohen. So what's the concern? So el liyotz, and so the Gemara rather says it's the people who leave early, that's the concern. As Rashi says, liyotz and shelo yamtino v'yetzu, in other words, the people who don't wait until the end of the reading of the Torah, they're going to leave early, they're not going to be counting the number of aliyahs, and so there again we have this concern, if you call up one Kohen after another Kohen, we have this concern that the people who leave early are going to think that the first Kohen is disqualified. And the Gemara continues, Shalchu le b'nei Galil le Rabbi Chelbo, the people of the Galil, they sent the following question to Rabbi Chelbo, Acharein, after them, and Rashi says, Acharein, the Kohen v'Levi, after the Kohen and the Levi, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Amud Aleph.